Hi, everybody. So nice to be here. This is my 3-month-old son, Khashayar. I'll just give a wave. He's supposed to be sleeping at this time, but of course, why would he sleep when he can see all these lights? So you'll just have to roll with me as we do parenting, maternity leave, keynote speaking. It will all be fine. So. So I'm very excited to speak to you about the transformative power of participatory and trauma-informed design. And if you read the description of the talk, I promised to move past the buzzwords to give you my very true and sort of pragmatic experience and what I've learned to see if it can help you in the work that you do. So my first thing to you is that this talk is an invitation for you to free yourself from the shackles of labels. So, we are process-driven people. I would find that most people here probably love process, and I am one that loves processes too. But something that I have realized over the years is that often processes can, especially when they're very rigid, and therefore the checklist of checklists, can kind of stop and hamper our creativity. So I'll start off in us opening our mind, which is to say that today I'm going to talk to you about how you can apply participatory and trauma-informed approaches to your design work. But I am not a designer. I am not a professional designer. I have had no background in service design and user research apart from one that I've learned myself. So I come to this with a very little credibility in terms of actual professional experience, and everything that I have is something that I kind of did by myself and learned from others. So I'm going to step aside from the label of sort of having a very illustrious background in professional design work. Hopefully you can do something similar. So let's start off with just who I am. So I was born in Glasgow. You can see my parents in Loch Lomond. And then I actually my parents took me to Pakistan, where my parents are from, and that's where I grew up. And I then came back to Glasgow for university and got really involved in entrepreneurship and student activities. And even in Pakistan, I was very involved in that. So my background really is in doing stuff with people. And that is how I really think about participatory work. And then when I was in university, I started volunteering. You'll see me doing a workshop here with the Hackney Pirates, running conferences, running bar camps and hackathons. As a millennial, I think I'm from the hackathon generation. What a wild ride, loads of ups and steep, steep downs. Not a big believer in hackathons anymore, having run lots of them. And then I started in the world of sort of civic tech in my sort of professional life, where I worked at a social enterprise that helped free up open data around companies and company ownership to fight corruption. I also did work on, again, a civic tech nonprofit that worked on rooting out corruption from procurement, where I worked with civil society, journalists, government folks from around 40 countries. And all this while, I also ran Chayn. And participatory approaches were actually part of all the work that I've done, but I've mostly been a community organizer looking at advocacy, events, policy, and really getting to do the work with people. So that's the kind of background that I've brought to Chayn, having had no background in sort of feminist work, like traditional feminist work, never really volunteered in that space, but did lots and lots of work around sort of participatory design and what that means in terms of working with communities, especially globally. So, and this last picture here you'll see is actually from it's from the month before I was due giving birth. That's how I remember it. So it must have been March. And this was us, sort of lots of campaigners coming together in the UK Parliament to really fight for and push the government to take some action on deepfake abuse, which we're going to talk about. So, designing for participation. I believe design can be both transformational, so where it can transform people, places, systems, And it can also be transportive, and that's an adjective I love using because it can physically make people believe or feel like they're in a different time and space. But it can also be exclusionary. So you might have read about how surveillance technology, if you look at on the face of it, there is a need for it. We need technology to help identify people with the world that's very big. And I don't believe that many of these systems are created with the abject, objective of actually discriminating against people. But the byproduct can be very discriminatory. And there's an argument to be made about how some of these kind of technologies are actually discriminatory by design because of the society we live in. So there's an example of surveillance tech not recognizing people of color, leading to really horrific sort of outcomes for black and brown men in the US, for example, or for Uyghurs in China. And then when the kind of work that I do more now, which is around gender-based violence, and you'll hear more about that, we know that online violence is a really harsh reality. So much so that this study that CNN did with Plan International asked young girls, and 75% of them had some experience with it. And there's examples of the kind of stuff that they had experienced, both from receiving an unsolicited picture to being harassed to threats of doxing. It's really, really grim. What started off as a bit of fun, where people were like, I'm going to look like Tom Cruise, and look at me flying, and us using technology that morphs our images, has become a tool for exploitation, for really, really horrific type of abuse, which leads to self-harm, to really extreme mental health distress, and in many cases has led to suicide. And it's pretty easy to do. It takes less than 30 minutes. And in some apps, it can take less than 10 minutes. It used to cost up to $20, but there are now tools that can do it for far less. So imagine having that kind of control just on the web. It's not even the dark web. I'm just talking about the open web. So this is the kind of work that I do. So before we get into it, I want to hear from you. How many of you think that, what percentage do you think is increase has there been in the pornographic deepfakes in 2023 compared to 2019? Just any guess, please. 1,000%. Okay, let's go with that. So, it's not as bad as you think. But this is 2025. We've had 2 years, so that number might as well be that. Given that the increase in those 3 years was that, you might be actually correct. And how many percentage of these videos do you think are pornographic? 98, one more? 50? 98, you were right. You received no award. Because we should not be celebrating this. This is horrible. How many percentage do you think actually target women? This should be easy. Everybody should get it. 100%, very close. 99%. So, and this kind of work knows no boundaries. Though interestingly, when we start looking at who are the people who are creating these applications, they are actually trackable. There are ways to clamp down on it. But I'm also interested in who are actually using these apps. So I think that's another side of the kind of tech sort of justice work that I think is really important. But where does design come in? Most of these apps aren't even trained on male bodies. So you put a male body on there, and it doesn't work because they've been trained to be used on women's and girls' bodies. Some of them, and this is going to be really hard to hear, are actually trained on children's bodies, which you could say is unisex. And that's really, really terrifying. And the amount of child abuse material that is out there, that has just been AI generated, is staggering. And it's a really big focus of law enforcement agencies. So what do we think of participatory processes? And I'm going to swing back to participatory design and then go back to the other side, the stuff that we've been talking about. In all the work that I've done and all the conversations I have, I find that there's a tendency to look at it like a linear process, where it's like a survey is like the worst participatory design you can have, and end-to-end decision-making, that's the best. That is the golden standard. And then there's focus groups, and there's co-design workshops, and lots of different frameworks that people use, and those kind of fall in the middle. I believe this is not true. In my experience, I do not think of it like that. I think meaningful and effective participation, it's not prescriptive. It's not about, how many hours of design work did we involve other people in? And then did we have the lived experience representation from all these 50 categories? And I feel like we get so caught up in it that we forget that it's about the meaningfulness and the effectiveness. There's really interesting research that was done in this space of procurement, which was done in Mongolia. And they found that there was an end-to-end participatory process with communities around really basic civil infrastructure. And there were people were compensated for participating in that. And I think it was a World Bank project. And what they found was that people said that overall, they had a really good experience. They felt empowered. The communities felt empowered to be deciding on what is built for them where. But they found it was too participatory, that it asked too much, and it took way too long. So therefore, the word effective is there, because I believe that when we talk about how much and what is appropriate, we need to think about what the end goal is. So I, controversially believe that it is not a linear. It depends on what is it that we're doing and who wants to be involved in how much. Because most of my work has been around working with community groups for different things, all the way from doing investigations into corruption to building policy work, and now in Chayn, coming up with resources and services for survivors of gender-based violence around 100 countries in 14 languages. And all of it is participatory, but the participation looks very different depending on what project it is. I will say one thing, which is that when it comes to focus groups, I think that is the only type of participatory work where I have very strong feeling that they tend to be overused and they underdeliver. Because it's a figment, it's a snapshot in time, and there's not enough work done to sort of work with our group in multiple ways. And secondly, the other thing that isn't on here, which is a lived experience sort of panels, which are very popular right now. And I think that people come from a very good place when they put those together. But I believe that when we're consulting with any sort of group, it should not be the same people that are consulted over years and years. Because that sort of knowledge, experience is, it becomes, we start veering towards the space of where we're thinking of people as a homogeneous group. And that's just not true. So I really believe in fluid, sort of fresh perspectives. So good design should look good, and we'll talk about looks in a bit. It should feel good, and it should uplift. And you should be able to really, really feel it in your bones. An example I have is from Manchester, a park that near where I live. And for all my time that I spend on writing about inclusive design and trauma-informed this and that, I walked into this park that's literally 20 minutes walk from my home, and I was stunned. Because I had been to this park before, but not with my toddler son, his older brother. And I had never seen a park from his eyes. And when I walked and I found that you'll see the sitting area has heights. The heights are variable. So what I found was he veered towards one where he could just sit and he didn't need me to lift him up and put him somewhere. And he was so elated that he could just do it himself. And I thought, this is what good design feels like. It's like he doesn't need my help, he just does it himself, and it's something that you could see in his face, and you can see he loves eating momos from there. So we go there, and now as his height has increased, we now sit at different benches. So we actually, over time, would have sat at every different kind of bench height that there is, and they're different formations. So that's kind of how I feel about design. And coming back to the work that I do at Chayn, we really stand by this where we say that wherever there's trauma, there is room for healing, but that healing will look different. So how do you design when people's healing paths are going to be different? I think this is one of the toughest things to sort of wrap your head around, is that when everybody has different needs, how can we have really highly customizable design? And especially in a world where we think that everything should be customized to our needs, it becomes even trickier. So here are some of the things that people have said and survivors have said about Chayn's work. I really encourage you to go to Chayn's website and check out the resources that we have. We have everything from guides about how to spot manipulation in your relationships to courses for healing. They're in 14 languages. They're supposed to be global resources, and they're all free. And everything has had survivor sort of design or participatory approaches to it, all the way from who we're consulting to who's writing the courses, who's checking, who's actually in the team, and those people all change all the time. So now, for those of you who are familiar with trauma-informed design, you would know that, I always get this wrong, but SAMHSA, which is the substance abuse authority in the US, they are the thought leader when it comes to trauma-informed care. They designed that around substance abuse and about supporting families and addicts with physically the spaces in which they were coming to get services. So it's legendary work. And one of the questions I get from designers is why didn't you just use those principles when you were thinking about Chayn? And the answer is because I didn't sit down to come up with principles. These are Chayn's principles. But I didn't just sit down and said, okay, now I'm going to create my own principle. It's not how it worked. This these principles came out of about 10 years of work in Chayn. We never sat down to come up with these principles. We had different words that we used and different factors that we considered as we did our work. And again, because we were volunteer run for 7 years of Chayn. Chayn is now 12 years. 12 years old. For 7 years, it was just volunteer run. So we had different people from different life stories involved in it. So the words kept changing, but then over time, what emerged was some commonalities. And I call myself a shepherd. So as a shepherd, I sat down and was able to bring that together and then get our partners, volunteers, staff, everybody to say, does this feel like what we do? So rather than more is this what we should do, we were we are happy with what we do. Is this a good representation of what we would do? And one of the principles used to be a little different. We came up with 2 iterations, and this is the one that we've settled on. And this is not a checklist. So we do trainings on this, and it is not a checklist. And that's why I said I want you to take away any sort of background that you may have about this work should be like this. We actually specifically make sure that we don't think of it as a checklist. Any work that we do, we think of it as some of these factors are going to be more important than others, and these should be prompts for consideration. So these should be prompts for consideration, for exploration, to help us understand, what is more important in this kind of process, and how do we work on that, and how do we reflect that in our work. So, this is what we have now. It may change in the future, and that's okay. So this is kind of what it exists, and there are much similarities with SAMHSA's principles as well. But really, this work is very, very focused on survivors of gender-based violence. So take from it what you can, but really it should be about reflecting things. And I'm again, big believer, cannot stress it enough, that it should not be a checklist. It should be about questions that make you think. You can read more about how these are applied at Chayn's website. I'm going to go through it, but I'm going to give you some examples. So one of the things that is really important is safety. You would have heard about safety by design. I just gave the example of surveillance tech, for example, or deepfake technology, where how can a technology like that would have thought safety by design when the actually outcome is so damaging? But those, I would say, are further extreme examples. There are smaller ways of thinking about it. So for example, if you are someone who is designing a service for people who are routinely let down by systems, how can you make sure that your service, which may not still get people the outcome that they're looking for, is still not, is at least a space where people feel acknowledged? And that's one of the things that has been really surprising, is that we have survivors reach out to us from countries where there are not laws to protect them, they have no money, there's no physical way for them to get out of the abusive situation that they're in. And that includes children sometimes. But one of the best feedbacks that I get, and I really feel like so moved by it, is when people say, just going through your resources makes me feel like I matter. And this is enough. So people understand the boundaries that they live in, and they know and it's frustrating that there's not a support available for them, which should be. And that's what systemic injustice is. But just being able to bear witness and to provide an emotionally safe space for people where they feel heard and seen can be really transformative. An example of how we implement this at Chayn, this is more of a physical example, is if someone wants to leave the site for maybe someone's passing by them and they don't want them to know that they're on a site to seek support, we think about physical and emotional safety. So the physical safety is that you navigate away and you cannot navigate back to the website, so that it closes the tab. So that's the physical safety. What's the emotional safety? The emotional safety is either takes you to a page which is about cute animal memes, cute baby animal memes, or to Wikipedia page, just the front page. We discussed about making it Google, and then we were like, no, just on principle, even though we all use Google, so I feel like it's a bit hypocritical, but I'm going to save just a few clicks, and it goes to Wikipedia, a project that I really, really support. The next is agency, and it's about honoring survivors' wishes to create affirming experiences. So this can be anything. So it's about giving people choice and thinking of people as free agents where they are able to make those choices. I feel like it's a word that gets used a lot, but I'm not sure if it's always applied. So an example from our own work, which I am giving an example that I find personally frustrating, is that we have a course platform where we have built courses which are supposed to be sequential. So the lessons are sequential. And the way we had designed it was that people had to do one. We suggested people do 1, 2, and then 3. And we didn't lock people into those choices, but we were very strong, do this, and then do this. And then that's not what people were doing. When we looked at the data, people were like, lesson 10, then 0, then 3. And it was not even full videos, they were 3 minutes here, and it was just wow. And we had a discussion about, okay, this is not how we've designed this to be. So we have to balance that as having an informational and educational platform. What is it that we want? Oh, he's asleep, great. And what is it that the users of our service want? And they just want to hop around, and that's okay. But we kept our structure, so we still had that suggestion for them, saying this is how we've designed it, but we're not locking people into those choices. Equity, and I think equity again is about how we design for inclusion, but also think about all the different ways that that word applies to people's lives. It's not just about race. The race is very important. It's not just about disability. Disability is such a big space, and I think we need to sort of understand all those experiences and knowledge of people, how having those, how living with those factors changes how people interact with systems and people. That part becomes really important. And just again, to say that people are not a homogenous group. There's a lot of tick boxing that happens, and it's just something that it's worth reminding. And the number one point is something that I'd like to, really say here, is about compensation. Compensation is important. In feminism, we talk about feminist economics, that compensating people for their labor is important. But I'm going to tell you, compensation is not everything. Because I ran a volunteer-run organization for 7 years, nobody got paid. And you know what was really interesting was a lot of people didn't want it as well. So because we were volunteer-run and everybody was doing it on the spare time, it only attracted people who were okay with that, and that's what they loved. They had other things happening in their life, and a few people who could really do with the money, if there was opportunity, they would ask for it, but they weren't in it for that. And some people specifically said, I don't want a monetary relationship with what I'm doing. What I want is to be part of a community. I want to see what I'm contributing towards, and that's okay. Obviously, as agents, if people working in professional environments, you should absolutely compensate people, but ask what else people want. It might be that, yes, compensation is a basic, you should be providing it, but actually what they would really like is spending a half a day observing what else you're doing, or helping with another aspect of the project or the service. It's so important to empower people in other ways and not just have money be the end all of it. It's very important, and it absolutely should be provided, but really think beyond it as well. Especially with people, and sometimes it's not possible. But if you're working with refugees or asylum seekers, you know that there are restrictions on how people can get paid. And you have to be creative in ways of compensating people. And oftentimes it can be even things like, helping people with groceries, or doing. I recently saw someone do a spa day, and I saw some online chatter about like how this was ridiculous. And when I asked some of the people who went there, they were like, it was the best day. Because they will never be able to afford it. So they were like, of all the things I'm volunteering for, this is amazing. I actually got to have a spa day. And I was like, great. Or having some sort of activities with the children. So really think beyond like what you think is the minimum. The minimum should happen, but let's do more. Similarly, I think giving people chances to talk about things that are out of scope for you. In, I think, research interviews, oftentimes you get nervous when someone's like, you're asking them about, let's say, about their housing situation, but then they start talking about this other issue that they're having, and you're like, oh, it's not am I being trauma extractive? I can't talk about that. If someone is willingly providing that information, it might be because they haven't had that space, or it might be that because they expect that's what you want to hear. Definitely check with them and tell them that's not what you hear, but give them the space to talk, because it might be that that's what they need, and they need that space. So building connection, part of not having a transactional relationship with community work is about allowing people to build connection with you. So that is something we should be doing. This is an example from Jonathan Chayn's work, where having a background in very female imagery, we kind of veered towards having something that was more gender neutral to see how our community reacts to it. And it's interesting, some of our work, we find that people will ask because they're expecting to see something very gender specific, or they will specifically say that your color scheme, for example, is very feminine. And we've had interesting discussions about what that means for our work. If we were saying we were designing for women and girls and non-binary people, but a lot of non-binary people might not want to have very feminine colors. So it kind of puts Chayn in an interesting place. I don't have answers to that. It's just sharing an observation. Privacy, I really suggest that you look at data feminism, read the data feminism book. It actually has these factors, 7 factors, which are very useful to apply to your work if you can. Accountability, I think accountability is one that we can all apply, and transparency and accountability go in hand. And in accountability, I found the thing that's really important is having clear communication. And that means, what is it that I can do? What is it that I cannot do? And it might not be possible for people. It might be what people are looking for, but that's okay. That's just part of life. But we have to be clear, and having really good, nourishing feedback loops. So, and just saying when things don't work. So I am a big fan of sharing when I mess something up. When something doesn't work, I am very fond of doing that, because I feel like there's so much pressure to get things right, and we are going to get things wrong. And if we're intentional about getting things right, then there should be no shame in just letting ourselves have a moment and fail. And there is learning that comes from failure, but sometimes there's no learning from failure, and that's okay too. This is an example from Chayn. We had a chatbot we were super excited about. It was the heyday of chatbots. And we specifically designed this chatbot with our trauma-informed design principles at that time. so that people were clear that it was not a human behind that service. And then the service went live, and after 2 years of like looking through the data, what I found was it doesn't matter even if the cat's talking to people, just how more clear can you be? It's a cat. But people still thought there might be a human. There's a chance some human is looking at that data. And there were really distressing messages coming at where people were just basically saying, why isn't this working? I just want to talk to a human. And just sharing really, really personal stuff that was really hard to read. So, and basically went nowhere. It just went into this black box of our like data store, and we didn't take any action on it. So I felt like that wasn't us living up to our principles. Yes, we created something with our design principles to do a particular thing, but when it hit real life, it didn't work. So we took that down, and we now actually have a human service that isn't a crisis support service, but it does help people reflect on their experiences. Plurality, this is one of my favorite ones. I feel like this is a word that we should all be like getting more accustomed to and using. And this is about like thinking that there's more to people than what's happened to them, or there's more to people than their identity. There's more to people than whatever box we think they're gonna fit in. And this is kind of hard to apply. I've already given this example of when you were interacting with people, and don't go in with an assumption about like, you're maybe designing for a particular group and you have a good idea about what that group looks like. But there might be other things that you should think about, and just giving people the space to be themselves and challenge your assumptions about them, and celebrating that you are, rather than meeting that with shame for yourself, meeting that with awe and an opportunity to learn. So, small example from Chayn, we sometimes play games because it's a remote organization. We're 14 people, 14 staff, and we played a game, a geography game. To guess, you get a country on the map and you have to guess which country it is. And we were really bad at some regions. And one of my team members kept saying, this is so embarrassing, this is so embarrassing. And I was like, no, it's not embarrassing. This is an opportunity to learn. When else would we have learned about this small country and it's really far away from us? This is great. Let's learn about what happens, let's go to their Wikipedia page, let's look at YouTube. And just really trying to see people for their fullness, I think that's really, really important. Power sharing, and I think this is where the participatory work comes in. There are so many different approaches to really share power, all the way from the kind of examples I've given you to, to the design justice movement, which is really about a radical power sharing. And again, if you're interested in that, definitely explore design justice and see there's great documentation and experimentation with what they're doing, all the way from really small sort of communal spaces projects in deprived areas to really large projects that people are doing around transforming neighborhoods, workspaces, laws, and organizing around injustice. Really, really amazing. In my experience, the things that I've always really enjoyed when it comes about power sharing is to really delineate what power means in that context. So when I was working with people on anti-corruption, I found that it was really interesting that on the face of it, I was working for a global north organization. And yeah, I grew up in Pakistan, so maybe I don't fit into that box, but I was definitely working for a global north organization, often going into countries in the global south. And again, on paper, it feels like a very uncomfortable kind of situation where I was going to train people. But actually, when I went to those training spaces, it was so interesting because people were so open. I was working with activists and journalists from India, Mexico, Argentina, Kenya, South Africa. And it was like in those workshops that we were creating, there was a power equation because I didn't know their context. I just knew how to help them with some of those investigations, but we were doing it together. And so that's the simplest way I can talk about is how can you do things together? And some of that would be where you take a lead, and some of that would be where someone else takes a lead, and that's okay. And just really thinking about creating spaces which allow that kind of connection to happen. And then lastly, it's hope, which is how do we create validating experiences for people. And this is my favorite one. It's the one that surprises people the most. And the reason I put this here is because from Chayn's work, again, looking at 1 in 3 women experience gender-based violence around the world, some of the situations that we are helping people in are places where, like I said, we cannot actually physically help people. We're helping them recognize what's happening to them is not their fault. We're holding space for them and helping them heal within themselves and connecting them to services wherever we can. And the thing that I hear a lot from survivors, when I first started Chayn did not look pretty, can I just tell you? It looked like any charity website. It was actually, now looking back, I laugh. But over the years, when we've done a lot of work on how it looks, and I feel like looks can often be thought of as just vanity work, and it's just really not. This has probably been the most surprising thing for me is people would come up to me at events and be like, oh my God, I just wanted to let you know that I used your website, because I was in this situation. It's so beautiful. It's so pretty. And I would be like, okay, great, that's a great feedback. But I never really thought more of it. And actually what it made me realize is that I was missing something there. When people say that, what they were saying was that I want to be on your website. I want to stay. Your website doesn't make me want to cry. So, a lot of charity websites are like, picture of abuse, picture of a punch, there's tears, blood. And it's like people who are in that situation know that's what happens to them. They don't need to be reminded of it. And Chayn's first website was exactly like that as well. So I'm holding my hand up there. But that process, and also in a conversation with my brother, of all people, my youngest brother, I was talking to him and he was like, this was in the early years of Chayn, and he was like, I love following your work, but it's very depressing. And I was like, yeah, but it's about abuse. He was like, yeah, but you're always sharing depressing stuff. And I think he was very young at that time. He was like 16, 17. And I was like, again, there is something I am missing there. And it made me realize that actually what I'm not sharing through our, at that time, our social platforms was just stories of hope, of people who are, confident in themselves, that it's not their fault, people who've done something afterwards. So to my team, I give them this cafe window test. One, because it's a very Hera test, because I love cafes, hipster cafes only. And one of the reasons I like them is because of branding. But really the idea is that you think about your service or your product as a window of a cafe. Why would someone want to come in? What are you offering? And when they come in, what are the different options they have? So when you start thinking about your organization, your physical space, your product, your service like that, it kind of opens your minds to, well, I have different kinds of people who might walk in. What are the kind of people I want to invite to stay for longer? And what are the kind of people that, okay, they're not really like the kind of audience I'm looking for, but do I need to provide something for them, or do I just let them pass? And how do I make that easy? So I'll end on this, is that with all my talk about trauma-informed and participatory approaches, it goes wrong all the time. And that's okay. Sometimes we make mistakes that we really should have learned from, and that's okay too. And this is a hilarious example for me, at least, is that we really focus so much on our tech and our UX, and we wanted to find out how people were finding our service. And we had a pop-up, and in 2015, we used to have a pop-up, and this was done by me with no tech knowledge. And this pop-up was so annoying because it would pop up within a second of people being on the website. So obviously, it was annoying people. And then in 2024, that we have a 14-member team with at least 4 people on the tech team and loads of focus on design, we still had that problem. We were like, can you let me go to the website before you ask me how it was? So yeah, we make the same mistake sometimes, and that's just part of it. So I will end there, and we have some time and space for questions and interactions and opinions. I would love to hear from you.
Well, I think that was inspirational on so many levels, not least because of your co-headline special guest. So massive kudos to you for this. So I'm sure we have lots of questions for Hera. Kat is also on the questions on the mic there, so that's cool. Please stick your hand up if you've got a question. I can see one here.
Question or comment? I always say it's better to have both. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be a suggestion as well.
Hi, first I want a little bit of clarification. When
Yeah.
you say there was an American organization called SAMHSA, I assume you're talking about the government's
Yes.
Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Yes.
I did a little work on their website about 25 years ago, and I had no
Wow.
idea they were anything more than a regulatory agency.
That's so
And I was
interesting.
wondering what happened in that time so that they became cutting edge in this area, and what you see maybe changing in the current environment.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So they absolutely are a government agency, and I can't claim to know them very well, but there's a part of their service, I don't know how it came about, but which has been based on what they were seeing in terms of the experiences of people that were coming through their services, and they created this trauma-informed care framework. And I do have, if you give me a second, I will just tell you what that framework is, because I thought someone might ask this question, so I took a screenshot of their website. So their framework is, they have 6 principles: safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and then cultural, historical, and gender issues. So they developed this to kind of reflect in all aspects of their work. And I think they had really, really good results from it, and they documented it. And if you go on their website now, if you just search for SAMHSA's trauma-informed principles, it comes up, and it has become the benchmark in the sector, whoever cares about trauma-informed work, in applying that. So when I was doing my, when ours were emerging, you'll see when you put them side by side, there's a lot of parallels. So we all sort of influence each other.
You might want to spell SAMHSA so that people can find it.
Yep. Let me see. It is SAM, S-A-M, H-S-A.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello. It struck me when you were talking that as an organisation you are potentially open to experiencing vicarious trauma through the work that you do. Can you speak a little bit about how you care, protect, support each other as an organisation, as a team, as you do your work?
That's a great question. So when, in the early days of Chayn, when we were doing this work, we were very much in a movement space, so it was mostly just being there for each other. There was nothing as an organization that we were providing. Obviously now the situation is different. We have funding. We proportional quite a bit of our funding to sort of well-being work. And that involves, making sure that there's like a therapist available for everybody in the team that's on demand. People can get 2 sessions. People who actually have more of the chat service that you saw, they have a clinical supervision. And then, we have flexible working, all those kind of things that go into it. We actually document all of that. So if anyone's interested in knowing more about vicarious trauma and how we deal with it and what we're learning about it, if you go to Chayn's, the org website, you'll be able to see some of it there. And also we blog about it because we think it's really interesting. And we actually offer it as a paid service as well, where we present what we do and what we've learned and help. We're providing that as a service to a large tech company as well for 2 years, helping their sort of team with vicarious trauma who are dealing with gender-based violence, sort of requests from their members. It's very important.
You're in the most awkward place in the auditorium.
Team effort, great. A really amazing talk, thank you. Really some inspirational stuff in there. I thought one of the features that you showed on your website was really, really interesting, and that was the leave your site feature. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you validated the need for that feature and what the user kind of expectations might be around offering a feature like that, because I think it's really quite a good
I think that's a fantastic question, and my answer might shock you. We have done 0 validation on this. in the way that you might think. It came about because we, as a team, we were like, we had a lot of survivors in the group because at that time we were volunteer run, and we were like, oh, this is needed because when this happened to me, so the validation came from a very small group of like people who were actually in the organization. So we designed it, and then we just thought of it, and we did it. And since then, we get a lot of anecdotal feedback about that being quite good. And also when we've done test sessions on our website for other stuff, people mention it, saying, oh, actually, this is really interesting. Whether people have used it in the moment, and in that moment it was really helpful for them, we haven't done dedicated investigation into that. But just from anecdotal feedback, our own team having had experiences of this, and just people randomly pointing it out to us when we're testing something else, that's kind of like how we validated it. Some of the very old stuff in Chayn, it will shock you guys because you will be like, where's the evidence for this? And the evidence was just we thought it was a good idea. And we just did it. Now we are a lot more intentional because now we have a team, paid team, that handles this. But the early days of Chayn, a lot of our work was based on personal experiences, hunches, ideas, and just throwing it out and then seeing how people react and then just rolling with it. So it was very organic. And there was someone here as well, I think, after that.
Hi there. Oh, I'm up here. Sorry. Just to echo what you just said into to the previous commenter as well, is that our agency, we worked with Refuge and Is This Okay? And did a site exits aspect based on trauma-informed research, and it was something that was very much appreciated. So yeah, it's a great move. But that wasn't my comment. My comment was, I really, really liked what you were saying in regards to taking a more fluid approach to participatory kind of research and design. And I'd be really interested to hear some more examples of your favorite instances of that in the work that you've done.
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, this is the kind of work, honestly, as a CEO, I wish I could do more of, because I hate that as a CEO, I'm just like supposed to like sit in just do the fundraising stuff and the other stuff. This is the stuff that actually excites me, and I've done throughout my career. So in Chayn, I'll give you some recent examples. So the stuff that I, like, the way that I love doing this is because of the way we work, making sure that I provide the parameter, or we provide the parameter, and then we get people involved in every aspect of it. So whether it is, we want to create a new research that looks into image-based abuse. We go to our community of volunteers and survivors. We're like, we want to do this. What do you think what is important? We come up with a plan together. We then take it away. We finesse it. We present it back saying, we've done this. What do you think? Get feedback. So it's not consensus-based approach. My personal style is I don't do a consensus-based approach, but those do exist. And like in the design justice movement, those are really important. And then we sort of move forward with an iterative, sort of like more fluid approach. And then when we feel like actually our own internal community is not enough, we need to go out, then we will specifically go out. So recently, Chayn has been doing, we have been building an AI tool that helps survivors of image-based abuse, which is incorrectly often called revenge porn, create legal-sounding letters that they can send to companies and to individuals to take down their images that have been uploaded without their consent. So with that, we had that idea based on previous experiences. We've created a prototype. Then we did a bunch of testing sessions with our own community. We invited survivors from around the world to come and do test sessions. We had multiple sessions of doing that. And what we found interesting was, based on who is in the group, the responses are very different. So our first group just weirdly ended up being lots of lawyers who were also survivors. So their responses were like, yes, how can I get involved in helping you write these letters? Then we did a session which was more, people were not involved professionally in this space, and their responses were different. They were more like, they just wanted to be engaged for that duration and then maybe later on, but they weren't really seeing that as a long-term engagement. Previously, when we've done research, I'm a big fan of inviting people to write in whatever way, whether there's voice notes, whether those are comments on a Facebook post, and capturing data that's already there. So that's public information, and combining that with more interviews, surveys, all that thing. I think a multimodal approach is really interesting because it gives you a completely different type of flavor. As an example, someone's very close to me, part of my family, who is a survivor of abuse. She is very different when you have her in a group setting, and she will say something completely different if you ask her to type it out on WhatsApp. So allowing people different ways of being involved. And she loves doing these, like the co-design sessions, but she's not always very vocal in them. Some people are better in person, some people are better online. So just providing as much diversity as you can in those experiences is great. And then you'll find that getting the right people in the room is the hardest thing for sure. And also people who, and this is harder to quantify, but who you are providing the right vibe for. So like, it's, if someone wants to do more hands-on work, are you providing a hands-on experience? And are you getting the best out of them? But really making sure those feedback loops are active, not just in that moment of interaction, but further on is really, really beneficial for you as someone who's creating a product or a service. Because people have the most insightful things that come out, but they don't always come out in that one instance of engagement. Yep.
Hello. Thank you very much for a really informative talk. Yeah, I'm here. And I was really interested in what you were saying about compensation. So as a disabled woman who is also someone who works in tech and accessibility, I'm constantly being asked for my opinion and could I just have a look at, and can I have a quick chat with you about so-and-so? And usually I am really pleased to help. However, I am already dealing with a lot more than many other people might be dealing with. So an able-bodied male who has a partner who lives with them, who might take on more of the housework, for example, I'm actually trying to deal with all of that and trying to do it with a disability and trying to do it on my own. So I was really pleased to see you talk about compensation, and it was very interesting to hear you talk about compensating staff and volunteers. But also, I'd like to hear more about whether you compensate the people who you consult, whether that's the co-production or an interview or a focus group.
Yeah, so our survivors, well, in the early days, we didn't have money, right? So everybody was just volunteering, so there was no compensation at that time. Whenever we got any project that had money, we started then like putting that in there. So now, thankfully, we have enough money that we have a budget that is assigned to compensating people. So like I was saying, I think compensation is like the basic foundation that we should be providing. And I would just say that I think how much you compensate, you should really have an honest look at your budget and think about how much importance are you giving to that. But let's say you are coming across, and I think what I say to you is probably going to be different to what I say to like a group of nonprofits. Because if someone is really struggling for funding, that's why I say that it's not the end all. But obviously you should provide it. So I have seen compensation that goes from £50 for an interview, 1 hour interview, all the way to £1,000 for an interview. Obviously the more you can provide, that's great. But I think that, especially in my culture, dignity is more important than money. And obviously money is connected to dignity as well. But I find that if a process pays you well and is extractive, some people will be like, it's fine, at least I got paid, great. So that's why it's the bare minimum. But if you can provide people with like recognition, dignity, and something else that they're looking for that you can actually provide, you actually build a long-term connection. So that's why I always mention that it's more than compensation. I think compensation is important, and you should really, we I think every year are getting better. And one example I'll share with compensation, which I found interesting, is in the Survivor AI that we've built, we were doing compensation for that. And what we said was, you get paid for the session that you attend, the co-design session, and these are people that are not part of our community, because with our community it would be very different. So these are, and then you can also claim up to, we said you can claim £100 for a session with a therapist. Now, people from around the world come to it, and what I noticed was that people, especially in countries that I'm very familiar with in the global south, some people were being super honest and being like, my therapist costs 25 pounds, so can I just get 25 pounds for that one session? And then some people in the similar country be like, actually, I'll take the whole £100. Now, I am no judgment for the person who's taking the £100 because that was available, but I felt that as a design approach, it was wrong, or it could have been better if we had just said flat £100 for everybody. You don't need to justify whether, why should someone be asking for 25 when they could actually be getting the 100. We've assigned budget for it. Someone's just being very truthful. And there's someone who's, yeah, making use of the opportunity, like, go for it. So I felt like that was a lesson for me in equity as well, is that maybe, like, so now we do it differently. Now we just say it's £100 maximum and encourage you to take the whole of it.
Okay. Thank you, Hera. Please show your appreciation again for Hera Hussain.